So we're thrilled to have Shane come by. He's a good friend of mine, and he's going to tell us a little bit about addiction and recovery and his personal experience. So, welcome, Shane.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a blessing to be here. It's a blessing to even be here to talk to you guys about this in reference to what I've been through in the past. Obviously, I struggle with addiction. I spent a long time trying to fight this thing on my own, trying to figure it out on my own. It wasn't until I humbled myself and went into a meeting, a 12-step meeting, raised my hand. I was somewhere in Central Florida, around the Lakeland, Winter Haven area. And I walked in there after just losing an exhausting battle with addiction. I walked in there and I remember most of the meeting was a blur, but I heard enough stuff and I had seen enough people, because I had been bouncing in and out of these rooms, whether I got a nudge from a judge or whatever the reasoning was. I'd bounce in and out of these rooms periodically for 10 or 15 years. But I'd see the same people saying the same thing, maybe just a little more aged, but they had figured a way out of this mess. They had figured a way out of active addiction, the bondage and in slavery to active addiction. And I knew that there had to be something to it. And I just remember raising my hand at the end of the meeting and I said, "My name is Shane and I'm an addict. And I can't figure this thing out. I can't live life with drugs and I can't live life without drugs. Can somebody please show me how you guys are doing this thing? Because I just can't figure it out." Because even through stints of abstinence and not using, I was using people, places, and things. It's a manifestation of the disease of addiction. And I do subscribe to the fact that it is a disease and it's a disease of addiction. And so, because if it was just about the drugs, anytime that whatever reasoning prompted me to stop using, whether that was a legal reason or I just physically couldn't go on, and I stopped for a period of time, I would have been fine. But the fact of the matter is, there's other manifestations of the disease. And I will obsess and compulse and use those things until my life becomes unmanageable. And that's what it teaches about in the first step, is our life is unmanageable. And so I had to really come to grips with that. You know, I always use this analogy when I speak somewhere, and I say, it's kind of like having the flu. If I have the flu, there are some symptoms of that flu. Sniffly nose, coughing, the NyQuil commercial, get it you can't rest medicine. I can go to the drugstore and I can get some NyQuil, I can get some Sudafed, or I can get something that's going to help remove the symptoms, but I still have the flu. And it's kind of like the same thing without the treatment of the 12 steps. That's the treatment of the disease of addiction. I always have the disease of addiction, but I can remove the symptoms and then I can work on the issue. But as long as I'm actively in the symptomatic process of using, there's no hope for me to get better.
What a great analogy.
Thank you.
Like that.
Thank you. I remember a time where my mother, God rest her soul, I lost her 2 years ago, but I remember a time when I called her, and by this time, Mama didn't want to hear any more lies. She didn't want to hear any more, "Come get me. Can I borrow some money?" That had played out, right? That's just where I was with my mother and everybody in my family at this time. But I remember calling her and I said, "Hey, Mom," she says, "I'm not bringing you any money." That was her instant response to me, was, "I'm not bringing you any money."
Good for her.
And I said, "Well, I don't really want any money this time, Mom." I said, I'm hungry." "Well, I'm not bringing you money for food because I know what you'll do with them." I said, "Mama, I promise you, I'm really just hungry." And I remember this place that I was at, it was not a good place. And I remember saying, "Please just take me to the store and get me something to eat." She goes, "Well, I'm not giving you a ride anywhere else." I said, I promise you, Mom, I'm not trying to manipulate you. And I really was just tired. And my mom, she was a good mama, and sometimes to my own demise. But she came anyway, and she was going to take me to the store. And I remember walking out of the place that I was at because I was so ashamed at the living situation of this home that I was at, that I didn't want her to see the animalistic level that I had climbed to. And I'd walk down the street so she could pick me up. And when she picked me up, I probably weighed 175 pounds. My eyes were sunk in the back of my head. Not any mother would want to see their own son looking the way that I did, and probably smelling the way that I did. And I remember looking at her, and I remember her saying to me, "Shane, Why won't you just stop?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, I realized that she just doesn't understand.
Right.
And guess what? It's not her responsibility to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But she's from the old school and she just doesn't understand. She thinks it's one big party.
Mm-hmm.
In her mind, I'm just out here having a good time. Little did she know that the good time had stopped long before this situation, long before this interaction. It was survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was looking at her in her eye and I looked at her and I said, Mama, I said, look at me. And I showed her my arms and I said, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, look at all the consequences. Look at all the opportunities that I've let slip away. Look at the fact that I'm not a productive, responsible father in this moment in my life. And I know that that was one of the most important things to me were my children, but I'm choosing to use drugs over taking care of my children in this season of my life. I said, look at me. If I could just stop, I promise I would have stopped a long time ago. And I would not have endured all of this hurting everybody that I love the most. And so in that moment though, I realized that, you know what? It's not her responsibility to understand. I'm not a victim. And I have to take some accountability in the fact that you don't understand this. And no longer am I pushing that on you for you to understand. And that was one of the biggest revelations. And it was just a few days later that I actually stopped using and found my way into a meeting and raised my hand and said, hey, I can't figure this thing out. I've tried really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 12 steps is what treats the disease of my addiction now.
You know, addiction takes you to such dark places, but then I've seen recovery just take you to places you never thought you could go that are wonderful. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I would say that when I first got clean, my sponsor said, and I have a sponsor, I still have a sponsor, but the sponsor at this time said, I want you to write down all the things you want to see out of your life. What do you want out of your life? Now that you're not using, you're not caught in that obsession, what are some things that you want in your life? And I wrote down some things that were not super hard to attain, right? But right in that moment, they seemed like a far cry, like responsible job, making money, standing on my own 2 feet. But after some years of being in recovery, I have far surpassed all of those things. Mm-hmm. And not just the monetary stuff. I mean, there's been some financial success for making some good decisions, some good financial decisions, not blowing my money, you know what I mean, on getting loaded. But also, I think the mending of the relationships that I never thought possible, the integrity that I have today, the I'm going to do the right thing even when no one's looking today. Those are the things that you can't take from me today. And so recovery has offered me the ability to be a good partner, a good friend, a good father. I mean, it's offered me the ability just to learn how to see the world through a different lens. And I'm not the victim. I'm not. I can be accountable for my part and I can see your part and I can accept you for who you are. And I'm going to accept me for who I am.
You know, I've often said that people in recovery have examined themselves in their lives in ways that other people haven't. So recovery is a real gift in that way. And I'm grateful to know you. I'm grateful for everything that you're doing for other people because you're carrying that message to others. And that is such a blessing to so many people. I've seen you help people and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for what you're doing and thank you for what this has done. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. And it was a blessing and an honor to be here.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.